you so much for attending September's Open Studio visit. It's a beautiful day here on Cape Cod. I was just talking about, it felt like summer was being extended. It is only the 4th, so yes, it is still summer. Anyway, today what we're going to be doing is talking a little bit about self-critique. What does that mean? How we can go about critiquing our own work, and what is really actually involved in the critique process. So what I have is some examples to show you, and two of them are paintings that are completed, and one of them is a painting that is incomplete. And just to give you some ideas of how I go about self-critiquing. Now, critiquing itself means that we are analyzing and we are making decisions. One of the things that's really, really, really important is that you have to remember, I wish I have the quote over here, but I do not remember where I got it from, but it's perfect. It says, look at your work critically, but not at yourself. Ground yourself and base yourself in confidence. And I really love that quote, because the reality of it is sometimes people get a little bit too critical of themselves. You know, they're thinking they can't do it. I'm not good enough to be an artist. And, you know, if critiques are making you, if a group critique where other people are saying things are making you feel like that, step back, because the idea of critique is that it is supposed to give you suggestions that empower you so you can develop your skills. You're not supposed to feel as if you're not worthy of being an artist. So push that to the side if you're feeling at all bad about yourself as an artist. It has to do with your artwork, not you. And I know we create it, so it's very easy to turn it back on ourselves and say, you know, something about that's negative about yourself. But I would advise don't do it, because it's the fast slope moving right down to not doing artwork anymore because you just don't feel like you're good enough for it. So, and that would be self-defeating, wouldn't it? Because how do we get better? We do more. Okay? So, and everybody has to go through those stages where their work's just not, you know, working out, something's not right. And that's usually an indication that what's happening is you are developing your skills. You haven't quite reached a level of ability that you can mesh everything together. And sometimes, yes, your work really is not satisfying. But that's not the time to give up. That's the time to push forward, because truthfully, if you are always doing everything you did well, you're not really challenging yourself. And I think art is also about challenging yourself to do things that are new and different and try different things. And you know, I'm going to give you an example. I took a fabulous workshop with Lorianne Signori. And one of the things that she had us do very early in the morning was go out and paint the atmosphere. And with that, what we were supposed to be using was watercolor paper, you know, sketchbooks, watercolor paper that we treated, and then we used gouache and pastels. And I'm just not skilled in using water medium. I make it too thin. You know, the colors don't look, you know, so I was like, I was having fun, but I was challenged by it. So when the workshop was all over, didn't give up, because I loved the idea and I loved her examples and the whole you know me in pastels. I love that multimedia component. So that was what grounded me. Is like, I'm going to get better in that. And I had a sketchbook. It must have had, I don't know, 80 pages in it, in front and back. And I spent the month of July into August just practicing gouache. I didn't even worry about the pastel. And I could see the difference from the beginning to the end of that month long, because all I did, I was just practicing. I wasn't trying to create anything that was going to go in a frame. I wasn't putting undue stress on myself to make something beautiful. Well, I did really want it to be beautiful, but I wasn't putting pressure on myself, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And, just that continual painting using that medium. I didn't even introduce pastels till I had been doing it for a good several weeks. And then I started adding pastel. And, it's just that happens when you try something new, you have a new medium, a new technique, a new subject matter, anything like that, you need to give yourself a little bit of wiggle room so that what you can do is you can develop your confidence in whatever it is your new endeavor is. So anyway, so today what I'm going to do is take you through a few things. But first, before I start doing more talking, just wanted to know from you. What when you hear the word self-critique, what is it that you think of? Does anyone want to chime in with either a comment or a question?
Well, I will. I'm Deborah. So every class I've had, there's always a critique by the students or the teacher. The teacher knowing I have more confidence in the teacher and what she says because she's teaching.
Right.
So how do I develop that skill? I mean, I know I've done it before in some of my paintings, but how do I know what's right and what's wrong with my painting?
That's a really good question because I have sat in many group critiques as a student. And I agree with you in terms of there's a level of confidence we have in the instructor, that the instructor is going to give
Mhm.
us solid advice. If you're in a mixed group of people that maybe you don't know and you're getting different suggestions thrown at you, it is questionable whether or not any of those are actually something that you want to really grab onto and say, I need to do this. Sometimes it's contradictory too. People can have different opinions. So
Mhm.
this is what I would suggest. Um, for any type of critique, what you want to do is you want to ground yourself in what it is that you intended to do with that painting first. So let's say you're doing a painting, and I'm going to use an example of one you're going to see. You're doing a painting, and it's a moody scene on the beach. It was you know, very somber sort of scene. Okay, so your goal is that your painting really takes on that feeling of a somber scene. You want it clearly to feel like it's the setting. Um, and any suggestion that comes along is like, oh, the foreground's too dark. Maybe it needs to be light. Oh, the sky really should look a little bit different. Maybe if you moved all those dark trees to the side, and this is going to make sense when you see this photo too, is that maybe it would be a happier painting. Maybe it would be a more light-filled painting. But if that wasn't what your intention was, that those suggestions are not helpful. So if you can identify before critique what it is that you have done that you're very pleased with and you feel it's a success, and if you identify those things that maybe were more challenging, you're not sure if you've got it quite right. And when it is your turn for a critique, you identify what it is you want help with. You say that. You say, I'm really pleased with the way the sky turned out. I love the glow on the water. But I'm just not sure about that foreground. I feel like the foreground is tipping forward. So what's happened is you've switched it right around. You have actually taken and you've given the group that is there, potentially people that don't really know your work, what level you are or anything, a basis of giving you some suggestions. So, and I think that's the most productive kind of critique is when you know what it is you found
Mhm.
success with, what it is that you need some assistance, some suggestions, some advice. Okay? Does that help? Can you see that happening in a critique?
It does, and I also am thinking about if I'm working on something similar to what I've just learned in a class, I can look at it and say, this is this is what I did for this look for the tomato,
Right.
and let me just try that myself on my tomato. The
Yes.
shade, the colors, and then I think it almost it stops the confusion.
Yes, and that is one of the things of group critiques that can happen is it does get very confusing and it can be contradictory. And there
Mm,
could be, and what can happen too is people have their own impressions of, what they feel is good
mhm.
about art. Now, we all have that. Okay, so that's it. So if you also take and you break it down, these are the different things that this is why the questions are good. It stops me from just like yakking on and everybody has to listen to me. So anyway, so you think of it. When you're critiquing, you're looking at a variety of things, and there are, certainly things you could probably find online, but I'm just going to break it down to the basics, okay? You're looking at your skill level of some very consistent pieces, components, the elements of art, so that how is your composition? How are my values? Have I used a good color scheme? The techniques that I used. Do I have soft edges? Do I have hard edges? You're looking at all those things that are really far more, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Far more grounded. They're not objective, okay? I mean, they are objective. So that what happens is if it's not a good composition, it is easier for people to say, you've got we'll take something quite simple. You've got a bullseye right smack in the middle and your eye's not wandering around. Okay. That's like obvious. Okay. So you're looking at those skills that other people can look at and they can respond to quite easily. Oh, the value components. Okay. Do you have an even level of values? So equal quantity of light, middle, darks. It's not a tip the scale towards having most of it a little bit lighter or even darker, that everything's a little bit more uniform. That in itself is, something that we can look at and we know, okay, that's, you should really have, unbalance it so that we don't have things that are even. They often talk about using that percentage of an 80-20, 75-25, and that can have to do with temperature, can have to do with value, it could have to do with your color, your size of your shapes, anything at all like that. Most people are going to look at and they can analyze that um, to various degrees. Now, what happens is the next one is very subjective, and that one has to do with your interpretation of either a photograph or a live scene, whether it's outdoors, interior, or still life. And the interpretive part is, I think, like one of I mean, yes, we want to have a good composition. We want our values to be, correct. But when it comes to the interpretation, that is where the personality comes from. And when they talk about find your voice, what's your style, a lot of it has to do with that very subjective part that comes from within. Now, that's the part that I think gets lost a lot of times in group critiques, which is why
Mhm.
if you have good self-critique skills, it means that when you go to a critique, you already have confidence knowing, okay, I really wanted that. Go back to the beach scene. I really wanted that beach scene to feel like it was very somber, that there was some sort of light at the end of the tunnel, but that, it really just didn't evoke feelings of like total happiness, but it did, when people look at it, you want it to feel as if there's some sort of drama that is happening, that maybe there's a color combination that will do that. Maybe it's a compositional piece. So those are the pieces that are harder for other people to respond to. Especially if it's a critique that is, in progress, that you haven't actually finished the piece yet. Which is why if you get used to doing that, your experience giving people suggestions and your experience, which I think is even more important, receiving suggestions is going to be very helpful because you have confidence in what you're doing and you know what you need help with. And that's key, to know what you want
Mhm.
assistance with or suggestions for. And that'll stop. I have been to critiques where people have made suggestions for my art, and I don't agree with them, and that's okay. You don't actually have to agree with everything
Mhm.
that people say, but it's grounded in the fact that I don't agree with it because I don't agree with it because of the color harmony I already have in there, the composition. I don't agree with it because I want it to be a moody, somber scene, not a lively, happy scene. And I'm using kind of things that are kind of um, quite opposite, so that they seem obvious. So, um, how do you think that would work?
I do. I think you hit the nail on the head for me, Betsy, because when you started mentioning composition, values, and colors, it says to me those are the components of art making.
Correct.
So that kind of says it all. Okay, look at
Yeah.
it and judge from there.
Exactly. And you can, and especially if people are starting out, sometimes, not always, but sometimes it is just easier to ground yourself in critiques that revolve around those skills, because the basic skills that include, like I said, the elements of design, the use of medium, the types of strokes you're using, those are all tangible. We can see them, we can talk about them. That's more easier to analyze. Um,
Yeah.
but what you want to do is you want to think of the subjective part too. Okay?
Thank you. Yep. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments on that?
Um, Betsy, it's funny that you mentioned that today. I'm getting ready for a yard sale on Saturday, and I pulled out a picture that I did about 7 years ago. And I had actually had it framed for Bob, and at the time I thought it was wonderful. And so today when I saw it, I mean I didn't spend a lot of time looking at it, but I looked at it. I said, I think I could do a better job today on that. So it
That's it.
was, yeah, it was, I wasn't upset about it, because at the time I thought it was great, but but I know I could do a better job today. So
Right.
I thought it's interesting that you're talking about this, because that was the first thing I thought of when you started talking. Yeah.
Well, and that's a really fabulous point, because sometimes what we forget is where we came from. What were we doing when we started? Okay. And again, this goes back to why self-critique is so important. Keep paintings. I mean, I'm not saying you have to keep this when you framed, but if you keep photographs of paintings that you did, I mean, I sometimes I think, oh my God, the paintings I was doing like 20 years ago that I was happy with, which I should have been happy with, because the 10 years before that, I was hardly painting at all. So the reality of it is if you keep those paintings, either images of them or the actual paintings, it's far easier to acknowledge the progress that you've made. And the progress may have been in just changing of mediums and styles. It could be more complex compositions that people are using, and complexity too. Everything's a range, okay? So it's all infinite. You could just take each of those, skill components, and you could keep developing them until your last days of actually being an artist, which I
Yeah,
hope for all of us is our very last days.
I
But
mean, I really said to myself, you could do a better job today. So,
perfect.
yeah, yeah,
Perfect. Yeah, that's it.
yeah,
And the thing of it is my guess is when you did that, did you also say in your mind, well, maybe you didn't spend that much time thinking about it, but would you know what to do now to make that a better
yeah.
painting?
Well, especially because there's a tree in the foreground and there's not much depth to it. So I knew right away some of the
Yeah,
things that I needed to do.
yeah. And that's, and I think that's always reassuring, is to be able to, do that comparison of what you used to do and what you do now. And for some people, maybe that's months. For other people, it's years. Other people, it's decades. It doesn't really matter what it is. I think it's just that whole feeling of making progress one way or another.
Mhm.
Um, any other questions, comments? Okay. So, well, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull up the screen and I'm hoping I don't fumble over this too much because I want to show you some examples and talk about them. So I'm going to do share screen. Okay, I'm just going to double check. What is everybody seeing?
Cars, lights, a person on the
Okay,
right-hand side.
perfect. Okay. Um, okay, so this is a photograph, and this is just really the first two paintings are rather somber paintings, which is not something I do a lot, but it just coincidentally they were two of my more recent paintings. So, and it wasn't like I was in a somber mood. It just sometimes I think things hit you and it's almost as if the energy of one painting leads into another painting. And this was a image that I'd taken. That's my husband walking ahead. I don't know if anyone's noticed, cars are on the other side of the road. It was when we were in Great Britain. And we were walking over to our friend's house. So, I had a slew of these nighttime photographs, and I just love the nighttime photographs. So, I'm going to take you through the process of how I do a self-critique. I critique multiple times while I'm painting, as should you. Okay? It helps to constantly be thinking about your art in terms of those skills, composition, use of color and value, mark making, and also the energy of what kind of painting that you want to make. What is that subjective, emotive feeling that you're trying to convey? Okay, so this one did convey something that was, I felt a contrast of a lot of solitary open space, very busy lights, and the single figure that's walking away. When you have a photograph, you can crop it. You can do a variety of things. I didn't do that with this one. I'd taken so many photographs of my husband walking that I stuck with this. But if you only have one photograph, my suggestion would be that you crop it in multiple ways. Now, the one thing that stands out the most, very first thing you're going to do with your photograph, composition. How is the composition? Okay, well, this figure is like really crunched over on the side. Okay. This right here, at first I thought, ooh, that might be kind of nice. But what actually it did is it isolated the figure even more. So I thought, okay, you know what? I'll probably get rid of that, but I drew it both ways. I did a couple of different sketches. I didn't think to put the sketches in, well, I have the one I painted, but I do a lot of sketching ahead of time. So those sketches can help you um, evaluate the composition. The other thing it does is from a value slash no tan. I do a lot of no tan underpaintings. Um, what is the proportion of dark areas to light areas? That if you squint your eyes, that's falling towards the dark area. This is light. So I've got a strong composition in terms of having the photograph tipping towards the dark side. It's not half light and half dark. It's definitely tipping towards the dark side. perfect nighttime. That's what I want. Okay, so I go to my sketch, and this is the sketch that's on the paper. I haven't put the notan in yet. Sometimes I put like little marks in there. This one I didn't. Figure winds up changing. What happened is I thought, oh, maybe the figure should be carrying something, and I put that down. And I thought, what was my initial thing? What did I say? What kind of scene was this supposed to be?
Somber.
Somber. There was something jaunty about that bag, you know?
Yeah.
And I thought that bag swinging there to me didn't say somber.
No.
Okay. It had a little lot, and it's something that's minor. Somebody else may say, Betsy, that doesn't make any sense at all. Makes no difference. That's what I thought. I'm creating it. So out comes the bag. I'm not putting the bag in there. Put it in, took it out. Otherwise, I did a little bit of design work in here because I didn't want it to be an exact triangle that went up to the figure, which you'll see more in this one. So that is the notan, and it's a multi-level notan. You can see where all the lights are. Okay, starting paintings with notans is great. I do love it. I can't say I do it all the time, but I do a significant amount of my paintings, especially in the studio, are notan. And I have brushed, and notice I've used a dry brush, so I have the dark areas not solid but broken up. So I have dark to middle dark. And the same down here with this kind of puddly, wet pavement that's happening and where the light areas are. So I followed through with, okay, have I set up a composition where the figure, oh, look at he's still jaunty. I started with the bag. I did not remember that. We'll see him change. So at that point, I still thought I wanted the bag in there. Value shifts. Okay, so that's what I'm saying. Value shifts where I want it to feel like it's really dark. I don't want to have a strong value shift. Where I want it to feel like it's lighter, I have a light value shift. So now I'm thinking of value. There's self-critique. I'm doing it in my head. I'm talking about it. Okay, I want the edges of these cars to show up more at the top than they do at the bottom. Okay, I have higher contrast through there. So now what I've done is got, exaggerating here, but it is actually true, soft and hard edges. Soft edges where the values are close, hard edges where the values are wider apart. Now I start adding my color. Now, what I could do is I could start thinking in terms of local color, but I don't do a lot in total local color. I like bringing in other colors. So I kind of was washing over with pastel. That was all, I should have mentioned it. That was acrylic ink that was underneath that. Now I'm starting on the pastels over this. And with this, I'm using colors that I'm feeling are more somber. So I'm still with that whole idea, make it look somber. I've taken out the bag. Isn't this wonderful about pastel? You can't even see that was there. That's something that uh, Judith, you're gonna love. It is really easy to fix mistakes with pastels or change things around because you can just wipe off the pastel and put something else down. So it does, it works out really nice. This is on pastel mat for anyone who's interested. Okay, so again, I'm still thinking of edges. I want these things to, be very close in value so that there's not a real strong difference between one edge. Look at the way the cars are starting to show up. Okay, my shapes in here. I really like this. And sometimes it's a point like, oh, I like the way that looks, but I didn't make the cut. And sometimes you like a part of a painting and you say, oh, yeah, but it's not going along with what I'm doing. So I did get it darker because if you look at the difference there, I've got too much light that's showing through in here. And I did want it to feel very dark, like you're really coming out of a very dark area. So that wound up getting shifted. And you can see again, same sort of those skill-based things, composition. He's falling pretty much right in the top third of the painting on the right-hand side. So if we drew a line this way and came across. He winds up being right about in the third. These guys are incidental. I don't want these cars to wind up being too strong. So again, self-critique. I'm saying, okay, so I have to be really careful what color I use. I have to make sure that we can see that they're cars, but that I haven't over detailed the cars because the story is really not about the cars, it's about the man that's walking on the path. Okay, that's another skill. Okay, you're thinking of the skills. Okay, we're still in the skill thing in the back of my mind. I'm still thinking of that somber scene. So both things are connecting. And if you can do that, write down words before you start of what kind of scene is this? What, even if it's a still life, what are some words that come to mind? Joyful, maybe it's playful, joyful. Well, use playful, joyful colors. Think of a composition that's got like a little bit of a looser edge to it. I'll show you the last painting in this is an example of that. Okay, and that's the final painting. So that, I wind up, thinking of all that. And as much as I had loved all that texture that was down here, what would have happened if this was all textury down here? I don't know if you remember, let me go back. Oh, there it is. Went too fast. That one right there. Doesn't your eye go down there?
Yeah, it takes away from the man.
It does. I mean, I just love all this overlapping. It was
But I
like,
love it. I just love it.
take photographs. See, if I had just kept, although I say that sometimes I forget to, but I loved it, but I knew it wasn't going to work for what I was painting.
Yeah.
But I loved it. So take a photograph of things that you love because that piece, it may not work for the painting you're on now, but
Mm-hmm.
it could work for another painting. The other thing that happens is maybe I was wrong. And I
Mm.
have a photograph to go back to and say, okay, look at what did I like about that? Can I fix my painting so that I bring up more of the lights that are down here? Okay. So there's another really fabulous tool for self-critiquing is take multiple photographs as you go along. Um, and you can see my two-tone paper here. That was the color of the paper that was underneath. And anything that was in the shadows was painted with this raw umber. And anything that was in the light or the light zones was the color of the paper, which was that very pale cream, peachy cream color that they have. So that's what I wound up with that. So then when we come to the self-critique at the end, now you're not critiquing it. You've been doing it all along, haven't you? You've asked your questions all along,
Mm-hmm.
which means when you get to the end, you're not starting a critique. You've already been critiquing. Now, a lot of times we do that inherently because we're constantly making decisions when we paint. But if you very consciously say to yourself, okay, how is this working? Have I used the right colors? Are my values correct? If you turn those moments while you're working on your painting into questions you want to ask yourself about the painting and the process, it's you are developing your self-critiquing. And then what happens is you wind up just doing that, automatically. Okay, so at the
Mm.
end, I smoothed out some of the areas in here. I didn't want it to be quite as jarring, have a little bit more of a softer edge so that there was a gradation from one to the other. I did change, I did not, I got rid of the wall that was over there. I felt like it was actually a wall that was at the edge of a garden. And I felt like it drew too much attention over there. Even if I had put it in the shadows, it still felt like it was too obvious. And I wanted to keep this very loose in here. What I did wind up doing, which was playful really, is I took the reds. See, I have all these reds over here that are coming from the taillights. And I put a little bit of red right over there. I also chose to do his jacket in a red. Anytime I have a color that's in isolation and only in one spot, I'm always looking for, and that's the point at which here I'm saying, look at, I put it here. I hadn't really decided at that point, that I was going to be doing him in a red jacket, but it's just enough where there's a little tie-in. Sometimes colors for me that stand on their own wind up overwhelming an area, and you don't move around. So I do like doing that. Now the next one, okay, that's the photograph. And if you're on the Cape,
Mm,
this is like a little preview here. Um,
mm,
there's a exhibit that takes place every other year at Katuah Center for the Arts, and artists receive a poem, and they have a couple of months to create a painting. I submit a painting, and a poet gets my painting in May, and they have to create a poem. So what happens is when you go to the show, which is a fabulous show and it's opening up next week, the painting has to be delivered. I believe it's on Monday or Tuesday. Um, each artist has two paintings. One of them is the initial one that they provided in May, and the poet has written a poem for it. The second painting you have in is the painting that you created from the poem that you received in May. So it's fascinating to see what happens. So again, the poem just happened to be a very somber poem. So I thought, okay, well, I guess I'm going with the old theme of somber here. And reading the poem, this is a nice way of working too. Is when I paint, I do have music playing, and I frequently try to choose music that suits the um the mood of the painting. Sometimes it's my mood, but it's more frequently the mood of the painting. Uh, and I like to use phrases and lyrics, and I write them down in the sketchbook along with the sketches that I've done in the photograph if I'm using a photograph, and just come up with some of that, the inner thought. What am I trying to project? What feeling am I trying to create? If I'm looking at something and I'm saying, really, if I want somebody else to see the same thing that I'm feeling. So this photograph, I went through tons of photographs for this. So on a self-critique point of view, in that I needed to find a photograph, and I could have worked from my imagination, but I do tend to always start off with photographs. Um, uh, I went through and I must have collected maybe 12 different photographs that I thought might go well with this poem. And this is the one that I chose. So again, I'm writing down words before you even start. Jot down what is it you want to convey. How are you going to approach that when it comes to your skills, your composition, your color, your values, your technique, and also your interpretation of the scene. What is it that I want to say about it? And this is when they talk about, I mentioned before, your artistic voice, your style. What are you going to do? So I began with that. Again, it was somber. The references, this is going to appear in one of my newsletters when the show's actually up. So I'm not going to refer to the poem at this point, but you will, if I get permission from the poet, you'll get the photo and the poem. Some poets, what happens is their work can't be published if they're going to present it to other publications. It needs to be fresh and not so. So I honor that. So I don't really want to read any of the poem at all. So anyway, there was references to certain colors in the poem, but it was in terms of objects, and I translated that into the sky. It is total feeling of someone was coming out of some sort of personal either tragedy or turmoil or some sort of problem, but they were actually, in essence, trying to find that peace or that happiness. And that's what I took out of the poem. So that's what I tried to create. Um, and the idea of these is not to do it from like an illustration. It's you're bouncing it off. Again, you read something. What does that conjure up anything? Okay. Uh, could you say when you're listening to lyrics, you say, "Oh my gosh, that would make a fabulous painting." Doesn't mean you have to do it as an illustrative. You can just move from that. So again, the self-critique is from the very beginning when you're trying to choose what you want. Pretty pictures are wonderful, but what is that pretty picture telling you? And if it's not telling you anything that really conjures up those really strong emotions, then move to a different photograph. You really want something that's going to actually, create that feeling. So again, there's my note on. I forgot to take the photograph first. This was light. That was the darker area. Okay, this went through a couple of different phases. This was a winter poem. Okay, so I said winter. Okay, so this did not make the cut in my critiquing, my self-critiquing. Okay, so remember what I said about the feeling of coming out of something that was painful or sorrowful or tragic? Does it have that feeling? Some of it does. Okay. But there's something that's stopping you from feeling like you were in that. And that's this right here. Because what happens is this has just as much lovely light falling on it. See the lovely light here? I also felt like this almost felt like it was standing up. I didn't really feel like I had grounded this. I felt like there was too much light here. Remember, the idea that I had from that poem was that it was, to coin a phrase, the light at the end of the tunnel. Okay, well, I have the light through the whole thing. So I thought, okay, as much as I liked it, there were some things I wanted to change on it. It's like, so I got in there and I changed it. I kind of blued things up a little bit too, but I still was having too much light in here. I went a little bit crazy down here with all this too. And for lack of anything else other than saying like it's crazy, it's a compositional thing. Okay. I've got too many of these just like marks, and they're all about, notice it, they're all about the same um level of hardness. There's a couple of them that are lighter, but they're all about the same. And I've got this sliding board right here. That's another skill. That's that first thing that you're doing when you're looking at things from compositional point of view. Too much of a straight edge here. It's definitely not feeling as light as the last one. So I'm on a roll. This is looking good. I feel like we're heading towards that. Okay. Knocked it down a little bit more here. Still not happy with this, but see what's the trans. I'm just going to go back. Look at that. Okay. Now we look here. That contrast now, this area here, that does feel more like the light at the end as opposed to light in the beginning. Okay. And that comes from that subjective interpretive part. Okay. Maybe the other one's absolutely fine from a painting point of view, but it was that subjective part that I was going for at this point. I really needed to make that work. And that's the part that you want to be thinking of. Oh, yeah. I went a little bit crazy with the little snowflakey thing there. I was just having fun making snowflakes. I thought, okay, now you're getting a little carried away. So I did wipe off some of the snowflakes. And this is what I wound up with. And I felt like the front. Notice this? I wiped out. Remember what I said? All very much, this goes back to skill. Same edging. They're all like about the same pressure. Okay, they look like they're lying on top. It's just nothing shows any deviation in the types of marks. Maybe a little bit thinner or thicker, but that's about it. This here, I broke them up. Okay, so they kind of dissipated a little bit. Um, the front definitely feels very somber. It feels, I'm not saying it feels tragic, but it certainly gives more of that feeling as down here is where that light is, that goal moving towards it. So this one here took on a lot more subjectivity in what I was trying to do with the painting. Now, when you are painting, do any of you either jot down or even think of maybe what sort of emotive feeling you're trying to create so that when people look at it, they may have some reaction to it that's more less on skills based value composition and more on that feels like or it conjures up memory of something. Does anyone do that? Okay, there you go. There's something for you to do. Okay. Hi, Connie. That's something for you to do. Okay. And just um I can't honestly say I've been doing that. I mean, I really on a practical level, it's probably been close to 20 years that I've been painting seriously, and really only the last 10 where I've had enough time once I retired from the public schools to be able to really delve into it. And although that was always in the back of my mind, guess what? A lot of times it stayed in the back of my mind. And that is something that I continually try to push forward. So even if you start out with something as simple of, I want this to be a joyful painting, I want this to be a somber painting, I want this, you can start off with adjectives that actually are something that are important to you in that, you know, whether it's a photograph or a still life, interior, plein air, what is it you're trying to say? So this one, this is the way it ended, and yes, I did wind up keeping some snowflakes in. Partly because I just liked them. I thought, well, and that did go along with the poem because it was, like I said, a winter one, and it did work out well. So if anyone's on the Cape next week, which is Friday the 12th, is the reception at Katuitt Center for the Arts, and it's really pretty impressive. But it is I must say, the show in one go it can be overwhelming because there's a lot to read and there's a lot to look at. So it's the sort of thing I pick and choose as I go around what I read. Um, just because it really it takes on a lot. Okay. Any questions on that emotive? I mean, the last one had some of it. This one really had even more because I was trying to interpret something that was given to me. Um, any questions? Comments? Can you see yourself like looking at that still life and writing down a couple of words that might prompt you to just kind of gather the ideas for that more subjective interpretation of it?
I think with the words, because I never do this, would get me away from just copying the photo. Do you
Correct.
think?
Yes, absolutely. And so that was the end. Now let's going to go back and let's look at the photo. Okay. So that had light back there, did not have color in that sky. Okay. I changed the composition so it was less of the sand, more of this right here. Just kind of crunch that up a little bit. That does have like I said, I did start with that whole idea of critiquing by critiquing the photographs and chose one that did have a somber feel to it, but ending with, there we go. ending with one that really, there was a stretch of the imagination when it came to the color. And unfortunately, the colors in this photograph just really aren't. Sometimes I find that those violets and blues, there's like reddish violet in there, bluish violet in there. I'm looking at it right there. Really, that's yellow is about the same in here. This whole area here looks a little dull on the screen, to tell you the truth. Okay. And the last one here is the one that I used for, well, that's not somber. Oh, that was from plein air class. And this is an example of one that you would doing a critique as you self-critique as you're working along, but then the self-critique that happens at the end of the painting session. And this one, that's about as far as I got. And I did have to leave, so I couldn't finish it. And sometimes that's kind of handy, just to be able to walk away. So now, let's say it's like, okay, so now what I would do, you're at the end of your painting or nearing the end of your painting. You still have some to do. So what you're going to do is you're going to go back to those skills. You're going to listen to those basic skills. How are my colors and my values? Anyone want to comment on anything that they see might remember, this is not totally finished. So and I will not be offended by anything anybody says. So let's just take values. What do we think of the values that are happening here?
I'm wondering, I like how you blurred the sunflowers in the distance,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yep.
did they really look that bright? I don't know. I think a
Yeah,
lot of
I know. That's a really good point. And why do they look bright back there? Because they're not as bright as this. So why do
no,
they look bright?
because they're a sunflower and it's yellow.
Correct. And what's behind them? A
Green,
darker value.
right?
Okay. So one of the things that you could do,
Oh, yeah.
okay, not change the sunflowers, change the what's behind them. So if you're
Oh,
happy with this, if you say,
hmm,
yeah, but that's the way those, they still, the sun was out, there's some clouds in the sky, but it was a nice day. What I'm going to do is and you don't want to change one component, look at what's around it. Okay, there's a
mm,
pretty dark, probably if you squint your eyes and look at it, it's probably the darkest value that's in there is behind it, right?
right.
So if I change this value and I make this lighter, and I could also say, yeah, it's really kind of a dull color, it's dark. Okay, it was trees back there. Who knows this scene? Nobody, none of you guys know where this was. So that could be anything. So I could choose a little cooler color that's back there, but I would also choose one when it comes to value that's lighter, something that's dull and cool and lighter. Not as light as this, but so I don't have as much of a contrast between
Mm,
those two things. So that's something that could happen with this. If I decided to keep this, I'd say, wow, that really needs to get toned down. For another thing too is look at this section of the trees here. It's the same
hmm.
as the trees there. Guess what? They're farther away.
Oh,
Okay, I
yeah.
want that to feel like it's farther away. I'm gonna drop that value down. I'm gonna dull, it's already a dull color, so I got a dull color. The value's wrong. And I could cool that up a little bit. And that would help take care of that. S- Over here, it looks as though I started adding some greens up here. Okay, any other comments or questions? If you were critiquing this, what would you ask? Someone's still working, well, I'm still working on it, and just looking for comments that you could make, and you can stick with the skills part of it, color, value, composition.
I'm wondering what you're gonna do in the right lower corner.
Right here, I know. I'm wondering that too. Okay. Excellent question. This was actually the dirt path that was on the side of the uh, the field of sunflowers. What I would like to do is actually this has become a wedge, and right now it really does look like a wedge because it hasn't been actually worked on. These colors that I have here, I would slightly take this blue that's here, I would bring that a little bit forward, but what I would also do is I would dull it out and I would bring it back. I like this line that's here. It's helping to create this sort of a feel. So what I would do with this is I would say, okay, I want it to feel like it's going backwards. So I can use perspective, compositional trick. And I could take and I could add some sort of a line that's here, okay, that would kind of turn that wedge into more than just the whole thing on the side. The other thing I would do is another skill thing is the direction of the stroke. I want this to lie a little flatter. So I would use strokes that were probably a little bit more horizontal with some vertical strokes back there because it's way off in the distance. So two things could happen. Okay, one, change this up, take advantage of that line that I drew there so that I'm making more of a trough or a line. So I've got a little perspective that's happening. I've already got it with this. The sunflowers are smaller here, larger here, path narrows, keep that going, and change the direction of my strokes. Okay, so there's three skill things that you'd be working on: your composition, your color value, and your strokes. Okay, so you do that when you're looking at your painting and say, okay, skill first. Okay, anything else anyone would
I
question?
forgot about strokes. Strokes are important. Forgot about
Strokes
all
are
about it.
important. Now, strokes really, it's a skill, but truthfully, I think strokes, but the same with color, everything winds up falling in that interpretive section, which is the next piece is you're trying to, I'm not copying a scene, I'm trying to interject my own liveliness, joyfulness onto this. So, no, there were no violets and blues in that, in that, in that mass of sunflowers. But boy, doesn't it make it feel happy? You know? So it's like that sort of thing that's happening here. And the direction of your strokes. Always thinking of the directions of your strokes. In here, I lost a little bit of the variation that's going on. I wouldn't touch something like that until I'd done more. Um, this in here, you can see that the edges show up. These were carved out, the sunflowers. They're carved out with the greens all through here. And just, are there areas where I need to make a little darker? Now, Judith, what's really nice about pastels, depending on, and using good paper helps, is there's a variety of colors that are underneath here. You can just take and I can say, okay, it looks like there's a halo around this. Okay? That's a critique. That's a skill. I put a halo around when I was carving it. Okay, and I can see it and it bothers me. So what I could do is I could take a brush and I could just brush off some of that green that's there and the color that's underneath will show up. And if it doesn't work, I can just add a different color green so I don't have such a halo around something. So it's also looking at the finer pieces. And again, and I just keep repeating it because I want you to walk away and realize there's two main categories you're going to do. You're going to critique your skills and you're going to critique your interpretation of the scene so that we have that wonderful emotive subjective part that you're imposing on the scene. Does need to be a little bit more lively, I think, in some of this background right up here. That's looking. I'm going to change that around. You'll see the finished one when I get it done. It's a plein air, and you know me with plein airs, I don't really like doing a lot to them after I get them back home, but this one does need a little bit extra. And then on the emotive end, I think by the time I took and I got rid of this same color back here, I added some nice lively strokes of, getting the contours of the lines. See these lines when you do your drawing, if you draw underneath, draw the direction that you would like the strokes to be, okay? So that I can put those pastel strokes on. And I think with this guy right here and that guy right there, it does have a little fun little um, jovial feel to it. Hopefully. I was a little questioning this one. I would not take this out until I finished because he stands out on his own, but I kind of like the way he just stands there at the top. One thing bothers me is he's almost directly behind that. So I might change the size of that one. Okay. So it's a little bit smaller through there. So hopefully everyone, got something out of that idea of self-critiquing and what it is that you could do for yourself with your own work at home. And when I send out the newsletter with the recording, I'll just jot down those two areas, that skill and the interpretive part. Those are two really nice ones. And remember, if you're going to a critique, or if you're in something and there is going to be a critique, a really good way to state something is what do you feel is a success and what is it you would improve? And to tell you the truth, or do you need help with? Every class I teach, that is the way we open up critique. You have to say, what is it you're pleased with, and what would you like some feedback on? And it's
Betsy,
a nice way of taking charge, because the critique, a group critique, is only helpful if you're getting the feedback that you direct the feedback towards where it is that you want.
hey Betsy,
Yep,
what is your focal point? I mean, I'm thinking you would say the large sunflowers in the front, but I am drawn
I know.
to the soft um, forms in the back of, yeah,
Yeah,
I love that.
yeah. So you want to know something, but this is also set up anytime you have a focal point. Okay, the reality of it is the focal point gets an awful lot of credit when in fact it's really everything that is designed to move around the focal point. So there's a lot of action that,
Oh,
you see what I mean? See what's
yes,
happening here?
I get it.
So the
Okay.
placement of these, I eliminated lots of sunflowers because the reality of it is I wanted these two to stand out. This guy kind of, compositionally, he is slightly, out of the loop. If you're, like when you talk about dividing it into thirds and it falls on the thirds. But, again, I mean, I do think of that, but I would not get overly caught up in placing things right in the third section. I think it's
Placing.
more important to think of the fact of how is the movement within the painting, the moving
Hmm.
around in the painting, this difference in size. Okay,
Hmm.
they get smaller. The way these guys are all compact in here, it feels
Mm.
like you got a big mass of them back there. So it balances out these little guys that are right here. I could put something else right in here, which would make these three guys right here um, acting as a unit. Not a bad idea. I could do that.
Yep.
Yeah. Oops. Oops. Whoops. Where'd it go? I was trying to do that to bring it in
Oh,
closer
yeah.
so you could see the and some of these, I could do a little contrast. This is where I would probably use a brush and just brush off a little bit because you can see there's a dark color underneath. See in here? So I
Hmm.
could just brush a little off so those leaves show up. Let me go back. There we go. Whoa, this is not easy to control, clearly.
Betsy, one of the things I love that I didn't notice at first, but it's the pinky rose that's on the upper left behind the trees. It's like that just pulls me right in.
Oh, Oh,
And I
yeah,
think,
that's just the paper showing through, I think.
oh,
Or
wow,
maybe it's my strokes. No, it must have been my underpainting.
underpainting.
It's probably this color that's underneath.
Yeah, I really like
Yeah.
that. And
Oh,
I
thank
really
you.
like your two stars in the front there. I mean, I just think they want to come out and play.
Yes, yes, that's exactly it. Playful. That's a good word. And there goes, you know what? When you write down those words that go with a painting from beginning to end, a lot of times they give you an idea for a title.
Ah, yeah.
There you
Hmm,
go.
that's
Okay.
interesting.
So I'm gonna click out of stop share and go back to seeing everybody. So, well, thank you for attending. That was really good. If you got any questions, get a hold of me afterwards. You'll get the video. And this month, my classes at Falmouth Art Center, they start on the 24th, which is last Wednesday of September at 9:30 till 12 on yeah, it's at 9:30 till 12. I don't want to get confused. My plein air classes are ending and they're at different times. And I'll be having a paint along, and that one takes place on Thursday the 18th. That's in 2 weeks. I'm dithering between a couple of different things, so you'll get the email on that the beginning of next week. And I know the paint along, that's a 2 hour class where we paint together. You receive information and details of colors and papers and size and the photo, and then we work on it together. And that's $20 for the 2 hour class. So if you ever have any ideas or questions you think that would be handy to have in a class, or I should say, or in the open studio, just let me know. That'd be great. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks, Betsy. Wonderful,
Thank you.
wonderful.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank
You
you.
really helped.